Live your life within the moment. And don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away. Our bodies move to the groove and the light that flickers. We get lost in the crowd, it's getting thicker. We get away from the drinks and chatter. Haven't said a word, but it doesn't matter. Feel the air get thinner. Standing in a blurry dream. No one else can see us. Live your life within the moment. And don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away.
Welcome to the JJDrones channel and welcome to this Easter Sunday special. Hallelujah, He is risen indeed. And a lot of us went to church today and a lot of us actually said those actual words because it's Easter Sunday. It's the celebration that Jesus Christ not only died for us, but He rose from the dead. And this is the day that we commemorate that miracle. And we all know the basic stories, or most of us do, but we've turned it into something that it's not. It's not about the Easter Bunny bringing us all candy. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, and one of the most important things that I thought of was running into the kitchen to see what the Easter Bunny bring, especially one of those Sakeley's eggs with one of her names on it. And if you're not familiar with a Sakeley's egg, it's one of those fudge eggs, and our names were all written on them. And we were so excited to get one every year. And then we'd have to go to church, and that was kind of a bummer because we didn't want to go to church. We just wanted to sit there and eat our candy. But, you know, that's what you do when you're kids. But when we had my brother on the program a couple of years ago, he reminded all of us that Easter is really the integral part of the entire holiday season. Yeah, Christmas is fun. We get all of the presents and everything, and there's Santa and this and that and the other thing. But without the death of Jesus Christ, we wouldn't have Christmas. And that's why I wanted to bring Davey on. And Dave is the pastor of Bethany Lutheran Church in Norway, Michigan, and he is the pastor of the Quinnesec Lutheran Church in Quinnesec, Michigan. So thank you, Dave, for coming on to the program, and welcome to this Easter Sunday special on the JJDrones program.
You are faithful, faithful through all things. You are faithful, faithful through all things. Faithful, faithful through all things.
And it is the JJDrones program. Thank you, everybody, for coming in today. I know there's a lot of people that are out there with family, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to watch this until later, but I do appreciate those of you that are here. We've got my dad, Dave Johnson. We've got TJ Giggles, FPV. We've got Anthony Webb. Thank you all so much for coming in tonight. And if you're just in the background and you're not in the chat, I welcome you as well. Thank you so much. just want to do a couple of reminders that if you'd like to have one of your videos featured on my website, email me, Jason at JJDrones360.com. And for everything JJ Drones related, go to JJDrones360.com. And if you're going to do some shopping on Amazon, check out my Amazon links over there on JJDrones360.com/Amazon1. And if you've got a blinker fluid submission, you can email Dan at droningveteran@gmail.com. And our Spreadshirt shop is open. You can help financially support the program. It's jjdrones.myspreadshop.com. And you can help donate to the Lee and Betty Johnson Memorial Charity by going to my website, JJDrones360.com/donate. It's JJDrones360.com/donate, or you can use the link that is pinned in the chat. Hey TJ, I talked to Brian about your blinker fluid. It is on the way. He's just trying to figure out how to ship it down to you, buddy. So he is sending it down there. And Haley is almost home. She's just listening now. Thank you so much for being here, Haley. It is Easter Sunday, and it's a very special time of year, especially in the Christian faith. And it's a special time that I would love to have my brother up, and he was kind enough to join the program. But before we get to him real quick, I do have a special message from Gary over at Jailbait and Tackle Outdoors. So let's get our unofficial sponsor up and let him give his special message to my dad. So here's his intro.
Hi, I'm Carl Marks. You're watching JJDrones on YouTube.
Hello, and thank you for stopping to listen to this message. This message goes out to Mr. David Johnson. That would be the father of Jason Johnson from at JJDrones. So I really appreciate this maple syrup. It's going to go great with some upcoming pancakes. You know, it's one of my adventures in the future. Right now, as you can see, I'm at a place called Reed's Syrup Works. That's at a campground in Florida called Troll Lake Campground. There's a history and story here. I don't know the story yet, but it's a thank you to you for your kind gesture. I'm going to report back. Hopefully, maybe we can have a camp host or somebody give us the official report on the history here. There's some other cool things here too. There's also like a sawmill a little ways away. But I thank you, and all the viewers on the at JJ Drones show would like to suggest to you a YouTube channel name for you, since you are very well composed in front of the camera. So we're suggesting to you your YouTube channel be DJ Drones. Thank you.
And that is Gary from Jailbait and Tackle Outdoors. Thank you very much, Gary. And we're going to bring up my brother Dave now. So Dave, welcome to the program.
Hi. Hi.
Before we get into it, I just want to do a quick reminder to those people that were not there for the Christmas program. What you said 2 years ago. Watch this.
Well, if you were to talk to the gospel writers, they would even say that without what happens to Jesus on the cross and the resurrection, the birth itself is insignificant. You know, the reason why the birth even means anything is because of the death and resurrection of Jesus himself. Otherwise, Jesus would just been simply another man that lived and walked this earth. That would have gone down without any sort of recognition in history books whatsoever. And the interesting thing is the things that we have to represent Christmas, the gifts, the Christmas tree, all are supposed to represent the overshadowing of the cross and the life that Jesus would give for each and every one of us. So the gift, Jesus being the gift of God to us, the tree representing the tree, the cross in which Jesus would hang upon. And even it is attributed to Martin Luther to start putting lights on the tree. In fact, there's nothing like a drunken German to decide, hey, what's a good idea? Let's throw some fire on this dried out Christmas tree and make it look pretty. But that was to signify that Jesus, being the light of the world, would then hang on that tree itself.
So basically, back then, 2 years ago, you were saying that Easter or Christmas, and pretty much all the holidays that we celebrate now, is based in the Easter holiday, and that's why I wanted to have you come on and kind of share with us the real, the in-depth story, because we all get basically the chopped down version that we get in church every Sunday. But what I would like you to do is basically start, and I'm guessing it would start off right around Palm Sunday, and walk us through the journey that has basically culminates into the reason why we have all of the holidays that we have.
So it's more than just Palm Sunday into Easter Sunday. There's a whole lot that happens prior in the Gospels that lead Jesus up to being threatened, but the religious leaders are threatened by his very existence to the point where they feel like he has to be killed. So it all leads up to Palm Sunday. Jesus says for 3 years has been going throughout the region of Galilee and Jerusalem, throughout the area of Judah, preaching and healing and casting out demons and doing all this amazing stuff, which has led to his popularity, which then leads us into Palm Sunday. Jesus has been saying things that make it sound like he has more authority than just a simple human. He's been doing healings, he's been doing miracles and everything like that. So he's gotten this huge crowd that's following him. And then Jesus rides into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and everybody sees this as the new Messiah, this new king was going to come in and establish a new reign, a new kingdom within Jerusalem, which would then be in opposition to the Roman Empire. But there's something significant about Jesus riding in on a donkey. There are two ways in which a conquering king would ride into a city that they were about to take over. They would either ride in on a horse, showing strength and superiority and conquering, conquest, or they could ride in on a donkey, which showed humility and that the king was coming in peace and that everything was going to be a peaceful sort of revolution.
Okay, so let me stop you there.
Yep.
So with it being a peaceful revolution, is that the reason why that there is such a threat to the kingdom, do you think? Is that because of how he came into the area? And what is the significance of the palms? Why use the palms on where he's traveling?
The palms were just basically a sign to show respect, admiration, and adoration. They were basically laying down anything they could find, their cloaks, their palms, anything they could grab onto, just to show that they were showing respect and honor and welcome to Jesus as he was entering into Jerusalem.
Okay.
What was the other question again?
You said that. Yeah, why were they threatened? Or not necessarily why were they threatened, but because he came in on a donkey, and as you said, that was a symbol that he was coming in peace, but that doesn't mean that the government actually wanted him to come in and have a revolution, whether it be peaceful or not. So do you think that is part of the reason why they felt so threatened?
I think they felt so threatened because he talked as if he had more authority than they did. Especially when we're talking about the religious leaders. They were the ones who told the people how to interpret God's law. And here comes Jesus telling them how to interpret God's law. He was basically insulting them. They had studied for years and years and years, and they studied under other rabbis. They studied under other texts, and they spent years trying to understand God's law. And here comes Jesus just telling them that they got it all wrong, that they didn't really fully understand. So they were threatened more by him as a person than they were about him coming in peace.
Okay, so he came in riding on a donkey. So basically, he's saying, "Hey, I'm coming in, and I'm basically coming in to try and change things, right?" Yeah. And so from that point on, where does the story go?
So the very first act, this differs in the Gospels. The Gospel of John places this at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke place it at the end of Jesus' ministry. But the first act, after Jesus riding in on the donkey into Jerusalem, he goes into the temple and drives out all the money changers and gets all the animals out of the temple. And this is the very thing that probably got him killed, is he started messing with the economy of the temple.
Okay, so he was just going in there saying, "Hey, this place is not your casino. This place isn't your place to make money. This is God's house, and you guys need to knock it off."
And that's pretty much it. The law states that if anyone showed up to Jerusalem and they didn't have a sacrifice for whatever reason, whether it was because they couldn't afford one, they couldn't bring it on the long journey, they were a widow, an orphan, or an alien in the land, if they did not have a sacrifice to be presented in the temple, especially during Passover, it was the responsibility of the temple to provide a sacrifice for the people who couldn't provide one. That was supposed to be a free thing. However, what it got turned into is that you had to buy the temple's sacrifice. That was the one that would be appropriate for you, and you'd have to go in and trade in your Roman coin for a temple coin, and the temple coin was obviously worth more than a Roman coin because you got to make your money somehow. And right. Then you would use that coin to buy your sacrifice, and that totally was against what God had set aside as part of his law for the people. And so Jesus was trying to correct it, but it was their moneymaker. It really was.
So it was a sacrifice that people were buying that was making the temple their money.
Yeah.
Okay, well that kind of sounds screwed up.
Charge. The temple was considered one of the wonders of the world. Herod's temple that he built was amazing. So people pilgrimaged out to that place, not just Jewish people, just to see this magnificent sight. And so, of course, they're going to charge admission to let people come in and see.
So they would let anybody in as long as you were willing to pay the price, is what you're saying?
Well, it all depends on how far in you were allowed to go.
Oh, okay.
Because if you were a woman or a Gentile, you could only sit outside the outer courts. You were not allowed inside the inner courts at all. It was only for Jewish males to go into the inner courts. And then, of course, further in was the priest, and then even further into the Holy of Holies was the high priest, and he was the only one allowed into that location.
So if he goes in there like a bull in a china shop, let's say, and is just turning everything over, why wasn't he arrested then?
Because they were afraid. He had a lot of popularity among the people. Really, if they didn't get the crowds behind the calls for crucifying him, he probably wouldn't have been convicted at all, because his popularity was so great. So after he goes through and basically runs roughshod over the temple, I'm assuming that was when everybody kind of got together and was like, "Hey, we got to get this guy out of here." Well, and that's the religious leaders. They really got together and they wanted to sway public opinion. You go into the Gospel of John, the thing that made the religious leaders want to kill Jesus is the fact that he raised Lazarus from the dead. And how can you stop someone if death can't even stop them? And so they wanted
Right.
to find a way to get rid of him.
Is it because they knew that he was a son of God that they wanted to do that after he raised Lazarus from the dead? Because, I mean, obviously, if you got somebody like that, wouldn't you rather have them on your side?
Right? I really think that they thought he was a false prophet. You know, they had their belief about what the law said and what the law was supposed to be interpreted as. And Jesus constantly told them that they were wrong. And so in their minds, only a false prophet would tell them they were wrong. A true prophet would tell them just how right they were.
Okay, so you say that they've been learning, for many, many years, what God's law is. Where in the world were they learning their information? Because if it's wrong, why are they learning the wrong information? Where are they getting their sources?
Well, it comes from the trainings of the rabbis and the Pharisees. Now, even though the Pharisees are considered enemies in the Gospels, they were actually very significant in Jewish education, Jewish law, as well as even coming up with the idea that you could worship God outside of Jerusalem. You didn't have to worship God in the temple. You could worship God where you were at. In fact, that's where synagogue comes from, which means simply in Greek, gathering together. And it was this idea you could worship God anywhere. You could gather together and worship God. Well, within the Pharisaical tradition also came the rabbinical tradition. And every Jewish boy and girl would be taught the Torah. From the moment they could start speaking until the age of 12, their whole entire being was about memorizing the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And once they did that, they would hit their bar mitzvah or their bat mitzvah, which that sounds familiar, right?
Yes.
But those students who showed promise, who felt the teachers felt that they could understand and learn even more about the Bible than what they had already been exposed to, they would then be put into another class. They would be elevated to a new standard. So they would go to class even longer and learn even more, memorize even more of the Bible. And then if they showed promise, then they would go into the 3rd level. And I can't remember what these different levels are. There was a name for each one of them. And so this 3rd level, you'd even learn even more, and then you'd try to understand the teachings of the rabbis and all the lore behind the stories of the Bible. And then if you finished that and graduated from that class, you then could go to a rabbi and basically audition or apply. And if the rabbi felt that you could do what the rabbi did and could understand the Bible the way the rabbi understood the Bible, then the rabbi would say to that person, "Come, follow me."
Okay.
So this is, yeah.
Go ahead.
So this whole "come, follow me" and Jesus being rabbi, there's a very strong connection with that. And it was about an elevating from one status to another. So there was a whole lot of education for the rabbis who felt that they understood and completely got a handle of God's law. They studied for years, and they're probably in their 20s by the time they finished their schooling. So basically from the year, let's say 5 years old, up until the age of 20, they've been doing nothing but studying the Bible.
Wow. Yeah. TJ wanted to know, is it ba or bar mitzvah? And what's
Bar
the difference
mitzvah.
if it's both? Okay.
No, there's one for girls and one for boys. Bar mitzvah is for boys. I think it's bat mitzvah for girls.
Okay, so there are 2. Hopefully that answers your question, TJ. Thank you for the question. So after Jesus has done his thing in the temple, he basically goes. When do we get from that situation up to the Last Supper, and what happens in between?
Well, in between, the Gospel of Matthew is really good at this, because after the cleansing of the temple, they have Jesus going to the temple day after day after day teaching. And there's a whole slew of parables in the Gospel of Matthew that Jesus tells during his last week here before he's crucified. So he was in the temple every single day, challenging the religious leaders, teaching the people parables, and just being there. That's why when he's arrested, he says, "Why didn't you arrest me earlier? I've been in the temple teaching you guys for days, and you didn't do anything, so why now?"
And that's the question that I brought up when you said that he went in and he was, overthrowing, or basically, running roughshod over the people collecting money, is that he was doing that. Why not have him arrested at that point?
Yeah.
But you say that he's going in there every day after day after day. Why do they even let him in there? Is it because, like you said, his popularity, or was it just out of respect, or why did they let him into the temple if they knew that's the way that he acted?
That's a really good question. I think it was mainly to do with his popularity. And not only that, but the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the religious leaders had mixed feelings about him. There were those who were completely adamantly against him, but there were those who were like, hey, we need to listen to him. He's teaching us something new. There's something more to him than just simply him being a mere human. There's something more. And unfortunately, that doesn't get too far, because the louder voices about crucify him win over, and he eventually gets hung on the cross.
Now let's not get too far forward here, but let's dive into this portion real quick. Now, he's done miracle upon miracle upon miracle up to this point, right?
Yeah.
Did that information get to the people that are in the temple? I know you said the raising of Lazarus, but I mean, he did more than that.
Yeah, he healed the sick, he made the blind see, the lame walk, the dead raised, the demons were cast out. He did all sorts of stuff in the 3 years that he was doing ministry. And the stories about him spread. So these religious, basically anyone in the temple who was listening to Jesus would have heard stories about what he had been up to and things that he had done. So I'm going to guess, just an educated guess, that and because I don't think there's anything in the scriptures that tells you for sure why they let him come in, but I'm going to just assume that it's probably because his popularity through the people that knew all of the stuff that was going on. But going towards so after he does that, then we're at the Last Supper, right? So then, this is all for the Passover celebration. So
okay,
this is the Seder meal. The Last Supper is the Seder meal. And it's a remembrance of the Passover meal that the Israelites had before they left the land of Egypt.
Okay, so there's something that happens during that meal that I'm sure that some people, wow, I lost my camera. Hang on, folks, the train wreck is real, as always. But once I get this situated, hopefully this will stay this time. Okay, so now when you actually have Jesus and the disciples sitting there for the Seder meal, as you call it, Jesus does something that some people may be completely either weirded out by or think that is strange, but he washed all of their feet.
Yeah.
And what was the significance of that?
Just the idea that he was a servant. This is how you lead. You lead by serving. And so he basically, after the meal, wraps a towel around his waist and washes the disciples' feet, which is interesting because their feet would have already been washed. They would have already come in, they would have had their feet washed. Either they would have done it themselves or a servant would have done it for them as they entered into the upper room. And then it's after the meal that Jesus decides to wash their feet again. And it is symbolic. It's like, if you're going to be a leader, this is how you lead. You lead by serving others.
Okay. So with the Easter, or with that portion of it, Peter actually had a problem with it.
Well, yeah. He basically thought that was beneath Jesus, because that was the job of a servant. A rabbi, a teacher, a leader should not stoop down and wash somebody else's feet. That was beneath him, and Peter would not dare to let Jesus do that. But then Jesus tells Peter, if you don't let me do this, you will have no share with me in what's to come. And Peter says, well, then not my feet, wash my whole body, wash me completely. And Jesus says, well, you're already clean, we just need to wash your feet.
So basically he's saying that, you may have had your feet washed before you came in here, but this is more than just washing your feet.
Yeah, and he basically said that. Do you realize what I did for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and that is what I am. But if I, your teacher and Lord, stoop down and wash your feet, then you should do the same also.
Now we're getting to the point where everybody's getting together, everybody's sitting around talking, and I'm sure they're probably talking about the Packers, because the Packers have been around since then.
Yeah.
And but they've been all just sitting around, and Jesus is basically putting out clues that there's basically a traitor in their midst.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. He says that the one who betrays him is the one who will dip bread with him. And here's the thing that's interesting about that is every single one of the disciples end up dipping their bread in with Jesus. So it's not just Judas that betrays Jesus. It's all the disciples that betray him. They all flee. Peter denies him 3 times. So it's not just Judas that is the betrayer. Judas is the one who gets him arrested, but the rest also betray Jesus. So it's not like any single one of them are without guilt.
Okay. Before we go on, we have a question from Mrs. Polnowski. She says, I thought it was symbolic to erasing the sins away.
The washing
of the feet. Yeah.
I've never heard that perspective, but that would definitely be an interesting take on that, to say, as Jesus washed their feet, which was the dirt, like one of the dirtiest parts of the body, that Jesus would wash everyone else too with what he was about to do. So I could see where you'd go with that.
Now, I think you're right about, the different the different people that would betray Jesus after and during the crucifixion. But all in all, Judas is the one that hands him over to the guards.
Yeah. But before we get to that, there's something interesting that Jesus does in the Seder meal. And he takes the bread and he breaks it and says to the disciples, this is my body, which is given for you. This is something we celebrate in the church when we celebrate Holy Communion. Remember these last words that Jesus spoke. And what he was doing, he was actually saying the liturgy of the Seder meal, talking about the lamb that was going to set the people free. But he took that narrative about the lamb and he made it about himself being the lamb. And so instead of the flesh of the bread being the flesh of the lamb, I'm getting my metaphors mixed up, but the bread being his flesh made it about him instead of about the lamb that was sacrificed to spread the blood on the doorpost. And then when he takes the cup and says, this cup is new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin, he says that, saying that instead of the blood being the lamb's blood, it is now my blood that is poured out for you for the forgiveness of sin, not just passing over the houses to let the Israelites free, but passing over our sin, in a sense, to set us free from the captivity that we've been a part of. So and Jesus makes the meal about himself, and changes the narrative.
So, and everybody that has gone to either a Catholic or a Lutheran, service has at least heard those words a bunch of times. And, that is something that has been part of the religious perspective for years and years and years. And that I don't think there's ever any dispute that is what happened.
Right.
But I did not know about the fact that was actually part of the Seder meal before Jesus said that. So that's extremely interesting. But it does make sense. Well, it does make sense because he is the Lamb of God, right?
Yep.
And with him being the Lamb of God, for him to basically exchange himself for the lamb, that totally makes sense to me. So after the meal, well, not even after the meal, during the meal, when Judas dipped his bread into the cup, didn't Jesus tell him, go out and do what you got to do, dude?
Yep. Basically, hey, you go do what you need to do. Head on out.
I mean, why didn't they stop him?
Because it had to be done this way. When you go through the Gospels, each one says it is necessary that Jesus was crucified. And so Judas needs to go out and betray Jesus for this all to happen. It was already planned out.
Right, but because even when the guards came to take him, it was either Peter or Simon Peter that went after one of the guards or with a sword.
Yep.
And so,
yeah.
Right. So if he's willing to do that, when they say Judas leave, even though this all has to be done, if they're willing to try and defend him when he's being picked up by the guards, why wouldn't they try and stop Judas before they even left? Is it something to where they just didn't even pay attention that he was leaving? Did he sneak out? Was he like James Bond and was able to just kind of slip out the back door?
No, I think they knew he left, but they had no idea why he was leaving. Judas had to go. Jesus said, go do what you need to do. And they had no idea that it was Judas going to the religious leaders and saying, I will give him over to you for as long as you pay me.
It must be nice. So it wasn't long after that they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, right?
Yeah. And you have to remember, there was a lot of drinking that went on a Seder meal. You had several glasses of wine. So when they get to the garden and Jesus is talking about the Bible talks about how the eyelids of the disciples were heavy and they were falling asleep, it's because they were very well lubricated. Let's just put it that way. And they were ready just to call it a night. They were ready just to pass out and wake up the next morning.
Okay. So, and that was when Jesus was pretty much put to the test, because isn't that when Satan basically came and tested him?
Oh no, that happened way before. What happens in the garden? What happens in the garden is Jesus goes to pray, and he is so overwhelmed by what he knows is going to happen that he sweats drops of blood. And in this, he prays, God, if you could take this cup from me, do so, but not what I will, but you will.
So he's basically saying, hey, dude, check this out, okay? Let's do something else. But as long as it's your idea.
Yeah. Is there any other way? As long as it's your idea, is there any other way we can do this?
And I mean, that's the human side, okay? This is when Jesus actually shows his true humanity. Because if he was just able to be God on earth, he'd just be like, okay, guys, just do it. Let's get it over with. I'm cool. You're cool. Everybody's cool, right? But Jesus he shows his humanity at this point because he's actually showing fear.
Yeah. Well, more stress and grief and worry. I wouldn't even say worry, because Jesus says don't worry. It was the stress. You know you're going to be beaten within an inch of your life. You know you're going to be hung from a cross. That's going to weigh on you as a human. It's just going to. And that's the important thing, is seeing the humanity of Jesus. Jesus came to show us what it's like to truly be human and to be in communion with God. Everything that Jesus said and did isn't outside the realm of possibility for humans to do. He just showed us the way we're supposed to live, and yet we still fall short of that.
So he does it 3 times, right? Everything, there's a lot of things happen in threes throughout this entire scenario.
And
or
the
this
number 3
entire
represents completeness and wholeness. There's a lot of numerology in the Bible. Complete and wholeness.
So he goes to pray, and then he comes back, and he wakes up his disciples because they passed out drunk. And so he goes back, he says, "Hey, I'm going back to pray. Keep watch, dudes, okay?" So he goes back to pray again, and then he comes back, and they're asleep again. But this time he lets them sleep, right?
Yeah, he just goes back. He's like, okay, fine, whatever.
So he goes back a third time, and the third time is basically when he says, "Thy will be done." And then he goes back to the disciples, and he wakes them up again, and he's like, "Hey guys, we got to rumble. It's time. Things are going to happen."
He says, "Look, my betrayer is at hand." And it's really interesting because Judas is going to betray Jesus with a kiss. And the question is, well, why did Judas need to kiss Jesus? Well, where they were camped out, they weren't the only ones camped out there. You have to remember that Jerusalem was just filled with people. There were people sleeping out and camping out in the outskirts of the city. They were all over the place because you had thousands of people coming for the Passover. So there were a lot of people named Jesus also. It was a pretty popular name, and Jesus wasn't the only one named Jesus.
Okay.
And so Judas has to come up with a sign like, okay, I'm going to show you where this Jesus is, and I'm going to go up to him, I'm going to kiss him. That's the man you are to arrest. And so Judas leads the officials and all the soldiers to Jesus, and he betrays him with a kiss. All right?
Now, Dad made a comment, and I only have waited to show his comment, because he says, remember, he could have called 10,000 angels. And the only reason I hold on to that comment is because when Peter struck which person was it? The
servant of the high priest.
Okay, the servant of the high priest. He actually basically was like, "Hey guys, calm down. If I wanted to, I could call down 10,000 angels right now and just obliterate everybody, but I'm going peacefully."
Yep, pretty much. And it's also another interesting thing in the Gospel of John. Gospel of John is like one of my favorite Gospels. It is so drastically different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It is such a fascinating Gospel, and I could go into do a whole hour talk on the Gospel of John, but I won't. But one thing that he does do is at the arrest of Jesus, they come and they say, "We are here, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." Or basically, "Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" And he says, "I am." The gospel, when you read it, says, "I am he." But the "I am" that's mentioned is the ego eimi, which happens when Moses is in the desert talking to God from the burning bush. And Moses says, "Well, who should I say sent me?" And God says, "Tell them I am sent you." Ego eimi in Greek, or Yahweh in Hebrew. And so when Jesus says, "I am," all the soldiers who are there bend the knee. They couldn't help but bend the knee to Jesus when he made that divine proclamation, "I am." Now let's get back to Judas, though.
Yeah, let's.
Because Judas gets a bad rap. But there are more and more commentaries that I'm seeing that talk about Judas being a zealot. And the zealots were about doing whatever they could to usher in God's kingdom here on earth, more specifically, the kingdom of Israel, and even more specifically, a new king that would reign in Jerusalem. And they thought that this was going to come by force. And if Judas was a zealot, then he would be expecting the Messiah to mount an army to rebel against the Roman occupiers. But yet Jesus wasn't doing this. He was taking his dear sweet time. And so Judas thought he could force Jesus's hand a little bit and went to the religious leaders and said that he was going to betray him in hopes that when they went to arrest Jesus, that Jesus would then fight back. That all of a sudden everything that they hoped for would take place. Jesus would start an insurrection, and which would lead to a revolution, and which would lead to the freedom of the Israelites from their Roman occupiers. But that didn't happen.
So is that why Judas basically hung himself after that?
Well, yeah. He realizes the mistake he made. He goes and just throws the silver back at the religious leaders. It's not what he wanted to begin with anyways. What he wanted was a revolution. And so he throws the money back at them, basically calls it blood money, and then he goes and hangs himself because he can't live with himself.
Well, and that made it for a very sticky situation for the religious leaders because they weren't able to use the blood money for the temple.
No, because somebody's life was lost at, that expense.
And then they ended up using that money to buy the potter's field where he hung himself.
Yeah. Go figure, right?
I know a few things, Dave.
Oh, I know. I still know more than you, but we'll just...
Oh, yes. No, I'm not going to deny that.
Right.
So...
Your dad's sitting there shaking his head, I bet you anything.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So after he made Texas, according to Paul...
Right.
that's not the Apostle Paul. That's just Paul. So after he made Texas, and let's go to when he goes in front of Pontius Pilate. Now Pontius Pilate, he was pretty. Oh, am I? Okay.
Yeah, you forget that they can't bring Jesus to Pilate without a proper trial among the Jewish people first, and so.
Okay, now this I didn't know.
In the middle of the night, Jesus is drugged to Caiaphas, the high priest, because he's the one who can usher a judgment against Jesus. And this is where Peter ends up denying Jesus, is basically in the outer courts outside the house of the high priest. And so while Jesus is being tried, Peter is out amongst the crowds who are all watching to see what's going to take place. And they, there are some people who recognize him and say, surely you are with him. Surely you're one of his followers. And that's where we hear Peter, who denies Jesus first time and the second time. And the third time they say, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. Your accent gives you away. And he basically swears at them. He cusses them out and says, I swear to you, I do not even know the man. And at that point, the rooster crows. And Peter remembers that at the Last Supper, Jesus told him, before this night is over, before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. And really the difference between Judas and Peter, in my opinion, is that Peter didn't go out and hang himself. Both of them were not beyond redemption. The difference is one of them was alive and the other wasn't. Which is actually even more of a tragedy.
Now, I mean... the fact that Peter didn't kill himself, Peter later on in life wasn't he hung up on a cross upside down, and that was basically at the site of the Vatican?
Yeah, okay. That's where they hold it. I don't know quite. Nobody really knows exactly where Peter was nailed to the cross, but that would be a very likely place, since the Vatican being where it is. But Peter was warned that the people were coming in to arrest him. And this is, of course, way after the crucifixion, way after the resurrection.
Right.
And they were able to get Peter out of Rome And as he's leaving the city, he sees an image of Jesus walking back into the city. And Peter says, Jesus, where are you going? And Jesus says, well, I'm going to go be crucified again. And at that moment, Peter turns around and walks back into the city and is arrested, and then eventually tried and eventually crucified upside down. And the reason why he's crucified upside down is he did not feel himself worthy enough to be crucified in the same manner that Jesus was. He still carried the burden of his denial with him throughout his life.
Wow. Yeah, that part I didn't know. I knew he was buried upside down on a cross, or not buried, but hung upside down on a cross. But I didn't know that was the reason why. That's really good information. So back to Pilate now. Pilate was pretty much ambiguous as to whether he was going to, have Jesus killed or if he was going to let him go. He didn't care one way or the other.
Well, you have to remember the thing that Jesus is on trial for is that they're claiming that he's a king. And this is sort of came out at Caiaphas' house, where Caiaphas just straight up asked, Jesus, are you the Son of the living God? And Jesus says, I am, and you'll see the Son of God coming with power, and so on and so forth. He says all this stuff, and Caiaphas tears his clothes and says, you have spoken blasphemy. What other testimony do we need? And so they cannot carry out a death sentence. They need Pilate. Because a death sentence, a crucifixion especially, was a Roman form of execution, not a Jewish form. And so they had to go Pilate to get permission to crucify Jesus. And that's why Pilate gets even brought into this at all, is because he's the governor who can authorize execution.
And this was during some sort of festival they had, probably Mardi Gras, or I don't know, maybe the Super Bowl was going on. But this was it was a Passover festival. Yeah, that's right. So they got the Passover going on, and every year during Passover they allow a prisoner to be released, right? And right now, they basically have it boiled down to Barabbas, who was a really bad dude, or Jesus, who they thought was a really bad dude. What was a crime that Barabbas was in prison for?
So Barabbas, they say he's a really bad dude. All right, and he had followers with him who mounted an insurrection against the Roman Empire. You have to remember, crucifixion was reserved for those who rebelled against the Roman Empire. It was to put someone on display to say, this is what happens when you rebel against Rome. So that gives us an idea as to what Barabbas was actually accused of. It is believed that he mounted an insurrection of some kind. He was one of the zealots, and he got caught. He and his followers got caught, and they quelled the rebellion, and they were going to crucify them, him and his followers. So the two other people who are crucified with Jesus were most likely followers of Barabbas, not thieves, but insurrectionists who were being put to death for their insurrection.
Wow. So that I didn't know also. So when there was also something about Pontius Pilate and his wife having dreams at night.
And I think this is in the Gospel of John. I can't remember specifically which gospel this comes out of, but I'm pretty sure it's John. And Pilate's wife has a dream about Jesus saying, you shouldn't have anything to do with this man. And so Pilate takes heed and listens to her. And that's where we get Pilate washing his hands of the blood of Jesus. And the people cry out, don't let his blood be on our heads. And he basically gives them what they want.
And he does say before he hands them over, his blood is on your hands and the hands of your children.
Yep. And they say, let it be so.
It's insane. Because, if you think about it, as a rational thinking human being, if you're sitting, and obviously mob mentality comes into play here, but if you're sitting there as a rational thinking human being sitting in front of somebody that says, hey, if I kill this guy, his blood's on your hands, not mine, and because I don't want nothing to do with it. You might have a change of thought or a change of mind, right? But these people are just bloodthirsty for Jesus.
Yeah, they are. And, you know, the religious leaders and even the Roman occupiers at this point, because the Roman soldiers take their turn in beating Jesus and having a field day with him as well. But they did a really good job of getting that mob mentality going. It's like they started getting people to rally up against him, shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." And they really got the mob up against them. And we've seen in psychology and sociology about how mob mentality works. And it is really a thing.
I just want to highlight this comment here just because this guy is an absolute hero. Hey man, good to see you're doing well. I loaded your truck for Reese Across America. Christ is King. Keep it up, brother. Thank you so much. They do great work up there in Maine at the Reese Across America facilities. And if you feel like donating to the Lee and Betty Memorial Charity, there's a link up in the chat pinned at the top. Sorry, I had to kind of put that in there because it's good to see him. I haven't seen him in the chat in a long time. Okay, so now when it comes to Jesus going on the path from where he was tried up into the hill, I don't remember the name of the hill.
Golgotha.
Okay,
The place of the skull.
Okay, yeah. So when I was a kid, I think they called it Skull Hill or something like that.
Yeah.
But he was stripped from his clothes. He was given a robe and a crown of thorns.
Well,
now
they beat him bloody, and they put the robe up over his sores. They placed the crown of thorns on his head, which had spikes, about yay long.
Okay.
Just shoved on his head. And of course, when they take the purple robe off him after they're done ridiculing him and beating him with some more, and so all those sores that had adhered to the purple cloth get ripped, causes even more pain. The crucifixion, the Passion of the Christ, is a perfect representation as to how brutal this whole scene was. It was awful. There's just no roundabout way of saying it.
He was beaten the entire walk to the hill, right?
Yep, and as the Catholic tradition has, he fell down 3 times along the way. This, I think it's the second time, or the second time is when Simon Cyrene is asked to help Jesus carry the cross. But along the time, every time he fell, they beat him. Like, come on, get up, get moving, get to your spot.
Now, wasn't there a time where he couldn't carry the cross anymore and somebody carried it for him?
Yeah, that's Simon of Cyrene. And
okay.
Either he carried it for him or he helped him carry the cross, because it was the criminal's responsibility to carry their own device of death. That was part of their punishment. They had to carry the thing that they would be killed on.
Okay, so he gets up to the hill now. I think there's kind of you would have to tell me, because when I went through the catechism through the Catholic Church, the person that was instructing us basically told us that when they put the nails into him, before they nailed him to the cross, the nails were actually surgically put in, so that when he was up on the cross, that it's so much pain that he would have to push up with his feet, and then whenever he pushed up with his feet, he'd have so much pain that it would basically, he'd probably pass out and then come back down on his wrists again, and then kind of repeat the process over and over.
So, yeah, you're right. On here, the nail would be driven right through that spot that holds you up. And there's a bundle of nerves there, extremely painful. And when you're hanging on the cross, your body weight pulling you down, gravity pulling you down, actually has you suffocate. So without the nail in the feet to push up on, someone would die pretty much right away. They would suffocate. So the Romans didn't want that. They wanted a crucifixion to last for days. Like I said, you're putting someone up on display so other people can see this is what happens if you rebel against Rome. And it was meant to be excruciating. It was meant to be painful. It was meant to last days, whereas Jesus was fortunate that his only lasted hours. But again, he was beaten with only an inch of his life. So pushing down on the nail on your feet would cause that nail here to rub up against that bundle of nerves and cause excruciating pain. Now, yes, there's a very good chance that you would pass out from the pain, sink back down. In order to catch a breath, you'd have to push up again. That's how you breathe. You would push up on the nail, take your breath, then let go, so on and so forth. Now, there are, that we say that there are 7 last words of Jesus from the cross. Some of them are, I thirst, Father, forgive them. This is your, John, this is your mother. Mary, or mother, this is your son. It is finished. All these words, Jesus would have had to have pushed down on that nail to speak these words. Every single word he spoke in excruciating pain.
Now, when he actually did that, is it true that one of the prisoners asked for his forgiveness that was hung next to him, or is that something that's kind of an old wives' tale?
Well, it all depends on which gospel you read. One gospel says that the 2 criminals who hung with him ridiculed him. But one of the gospels, and I believe it's John also, says that one of the criminals realized that Jesus was innocent and actually stood up and defended him. And then he says to Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says to him, today you will be with me in paradise.
Right. Yeah, and that's the one thing that I remember. Now, when they're trying to, give him wine and vinegar mix while he's sitting on the cross, and he's not taking it because he said at the Last Supper that was going to be the last time that he drank the fruit of the vine. Yep. So when he's up there on the cross and they think that he's screaming for Elijah to come and rescue him. What is the significance of Elijah in that respect?
Well, it was the belief that when the Messiah was going to come, Elijah would herald in. Elijah would basically come back down and say, here he is. This is the Messiah. And then everyone would be able to rally, with him. So the significance of Elijah coming down is like, well, Elijah's going to come. If Jesus is calling out and Elijah comes down, then Elijah's going to take him down from the cross, and something amazing is going to happen.
And that never happened. And basically, so how long was it before Jesus actually died at that point?
Oh man, I think it's like from noon to 3 hours. It could have been 6 hours. 3 hours. I'm pretty sure it was 3. I get my numbers mixed up all the time.
Well, we're going with the rule of 3, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was 3 hours.
Right.
And so that was when the after that's when the soldier came and pierced his side.
Yep, and blood and water came flowing out. And that was at the time where they were going to break the legs of Jesus. But because it was going to be the Sabbath, it was going to be the Passover, they didn't want any bodies hanging up on the cross for the Passover. So they broke the 2 criminals' legs, and they got to Jesus and realized, wait, he's already dead. We don't need to break his legs.
Well, nice guys. The first time they showed any sort of mercy.
Right? And you have to remember, like I said, you have to be able to push down on that nail so you don't suffocate. So when they broke the legs of the criminals, they just suffocated there shortly after.
Right, because they had no way of getting air anymore at that point.
Right, exactly.
So now they must have been afraid. Well, why don't you talk about the tomb? Was the tomb something that was pretty much a regular thing for them to put people in, or was this kind of a special condition because they really knew that Jesus was probably going to do something?
Well, tombs were a very common practice of putting people in. You know, when you hear the story of Lazarus was in a tomb. In fact, they rolled a rock in front of the tomb to keep Lazarus and the smell sealed in. So tombs were very common. And in fact, when we read about the death of Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea was a wealthy disciple of Jesus, but didn't follow him openly. He followed him privately for fear of the religious leaders. He had a tomb already for him, and he figured he would let Jesus have that tomb.
Mrs. Polnowski said yes to, you say, 3 hours. When we were little, we were not allowed to talk from 12 to 3. So there you go. Yep. That's actually really interesting, Mrs. Polnowski. I was not aware of that. And that's probably a really good way to show, respect during that period of time on Good Friday, is to not to speak between 12 to 3.
And I've been a part of church services that they've had service from noon to 3.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been in church for the Passion and for the walk, or where the priest will do the Stations of the Cross, yep. And that's a long mass. So, but there's nothing compared to what Jesus went through.
Right.
So we've got day 1 where Jesus is put in the tomb. Then we have day 2, which is they can't even do anything because there are women that wanted to bring spices and perfumes and stuff to help with the smell of the body, but it's the Sabbath.
To properly bury Jesus, they did a rush job. They wanted to make sure that they got him covered and that they prepared the body and that it was put in the tomb. They weren't able to prep it the way they normally would have. It would taken more time. Passover the sun would have set, Passover would have started, Sabbath would have started. There is no work to be done on the Sabbath. There is no work to be done over Passover. So they had to wait that day. They had to wait what we call Holy Saturday until the next morning at first sunlight.
Right, and in Jewish tradition, the Sabbath is on Saturday, so yep. None of the women could actually go in. Right, so
it Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Saturday sunup. Not Saturday, Sunday sunup. So, yeah, Friday sundown until that Sunday morning.
So the third day, when the women went to the tomb, and they were prepared to basically finish up the body, right?
Yeah.
And then they were basically shocked when there was nobody there.
Well, they were shocked that the stone was rolled away. That was their first concern, is who's going to roll that big stone out of the way so that we can get to the body. And then when they show up, the stone is already moved, and they're already perplexed. Well, what happened? And then that's when they find that the tomb is empty.
And then when they're in the tomb trying to figure out what the heck's going on, then they're visited by some angels.
Yep. Or Jesus, depends on which gospel you read. There are angels who tell the women, like in the Gospel of Mark that we read today, there was a figure who said, "He is not here, he has risen, he's gone ahead to Galilee ahead of you, just as he told you." Whereas in the Gospel of John, Mary Magdalene is at the tomb of Jesus, and it's not there, and she breaks down. She starts weeping, and Jesus comes up to her and says, "Mary, why are you weeping?" And she basically says, thinking he's the gardener, "If you've taken his body, please tell me where it is. I'm not going to tell anyone. Just show me so that I can take care of it properly." And then Jesus says to her, "Mary." And she recognizes him and says, "Rabboni," or teacher. So Jesus actually appears to Mary Magdalene at the tomb in the Gospel of John.
Okay, so it really just depends on the gospel that you're looking at then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so I'm going to go with your version because that makes more sense. And it's not very often we agree on something, but
Yeah, that
I'm
is
agreeing
very
with you
rare.
on this one. Yeah, so mark that on the calendar.
Yeah, I will. I'll celebrate it. I'll have cake.
Well, there's always a good reason for cake.
There's always a good reason for cake.
So after that, basically Jesus started showing up to the disciples, right?
Yep.
And they were kind of at a loss because they were like, we thought you died.
Yeah, because people don't get better from being dead. You don't meet somebody and be like, hey, how are you doing? Well, I died 3 days ago, but I'm better. You just don't get that. Which also
it
makes
happened
sense.
on Monty Python.
Oh, I'm not dead yet. I feel like I can go for a walk. Yeah. But you have to, it's completely understandable as to why the disciples didn't recognize Jesus. When you don't expect to see someone, even if you recognize the face, you're not going to recognize that it's them because they're not in a place that you'd normally see them. It's like when you're out in public and you see someone that you swear you know, but you don't usually see them at that place. And you're like, is that really so-and-so or is it not? Should I say hi or shouldn't I? And then you say hi and they look at you weird and boy, that's awkward because it wasn't the person you... Whereas the disciples, they see, it looks like Jesus, but he's dead.
And that's when he's like, hey, look, I've got the holes in my hands. I've got the hole in my side. And I've got party tricks that I can do with candles now.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but he also says, hey, guys, give me something to eat. Which is because the disciples thought he was a ghost. And everybody knows that ghosts can't eat.
And, when you take a trip from the cross up to heaven and heaven back down to earth, man, you want to stop at a Buc-ee's, but you don't got one around. So...
Yeah, it was actually, he missed out on the Friday fish fry, but he really wanted some food. So he said, hey, you guys got any fish?
Yep. And so, I think that pretty much boils down at least the Easter story up to that point. And
really
there's
does.
a lot of people.
There's so much more, but we took an hour and 12 minutes here to cover a whole week's worth of time and so much more in the Bible that we just couldn't touch on.
Right. And I appreciate you letting me, be dumb and ask you stupid questions because, I am dumb and this show is a train wreck.
No, it's not. But and like you say, there are no dumb questions. A lot of the questions you ask are questions that most people have. So, or they're too nervous to ask.
Now you have a Sunday service that you do online every Sunday. Do you want to give out that where you do that?
It's on Facebook. We do Facebook Live, and so Calvary Lutheran Church Quinnesec would be something to look up for the Quinnesec services, and Bethany Lutheran Church Norway would be the other one. And that should take you to our Facebook page. You can either just go there and like the page, or you can follow it. All our live stream services are on the page. You can go back and view you can even see today's Easter service if you wanted to.
I'm putting that up on the link or on the chat right now. So if you are so inclined, go check those out on Facebook. If you want to check out Dave's services that he has every Sunday, he does a live stream of his services every Sunday, so you can go check those out there. And if you definitely, if you want to go back and watch his Sunday service, you can definitely do that. Thank you, Lee, for being in. Appreciate you being here. There's so much that we didn't get to. There's so much that happens in the future, and there's stuff that happened on the in-betweens. But I try to shorten or keep the show to an hour, and I let this go over a little bit because I think it's just that important to talk about. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat because I will forward those off to Dave. because I can't answer your questions. I am not the theological scholar that he is, but I appreciate you coming on to the program and sharing all of your knowledge with all of us, because it truly is an important time of year, and it's good to know why we celebrate what we celebrate.
Well, thanks for having me. It was good to be here with you, Jason.
Yeah. Do you have any last words for our audience?
Oh, that sounds haunting.
Yes.
But no, just thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys were able to get some information, learn something new. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Oh, that's one other thing. You have a debate style get together that you have every Thursday, right?
Yep, we gather Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. at the Big Ten Sports Bar, and we talk theology. And we meet in the back room there.
You said it's Thursday, 6 p.m.
6:30 p.m.
Oh, 6:30 p.m.
Central Time.
Central Time, Thursdays. Are you going to ever live stream those?
No, we just don't have the capability to live stream those conversations. Yeah, but we're looking at doing something kind of like that.
Okay, well, if you are in the area and you want to join Dave for his Theology Thursdays at the Big Ten in Quinnesec, Michigan, at 6:30 p.m. on Central Time, and go join him there.
In the back room.
In the back room. So,
yep.
And I want to thank everybody that's been here for the entire hour, and even those that have come in a little bit later. Like I said, I think this is just important to know. It's good to know the history. Even if you're not a Christian, it's good to know the history of why Christians celebrate Easter. So, I mean, hopefully it helped. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or email me, and I will send those off to Dave, and I will get you answers. But I appreciate all of you for taking this ride with me and my brother, and a very happy Easter, all of you, and we'll see you later on down the road. Bye, guys.